I came home and I ate lunch, and then I prepared my bathroom the best I could, which included a huge pack of monstrous pads, a lot of ibuprofen and Tylenol, a lot of water, kind of settled in for what I knew was going to be a really, really hard night. I've read online that some doctors will prescribe you prescription pain medication because it is very painful, but my doctor just recommended ibuprofen and Tylenol, and so I went ahead and took 800 milligrams of ibuprofen before I even took the pills. I gave it about 20 minutes to kick in, and I was told that after you insert the pills, and I say insert because they actually go up you don't take them orally. I think you can take them orally, but I was instructed to take them intervaginally, which is as awkward as you think, putting 4 pills up there, but whatever. That was the least of my worries at the time. I put them in around 1 p.m. after having a very long talk and goodbye with the baby. And I had read that after inserting the pills, the bleeding can start anywhere between 1 and 10 hours, which is quite a window. And I kind of assumed that because my body hadn't started the process on its own at all, that it was going to be more on the longer end for me, which was true. I inserted the pills at 1 p.m. and I actually didn't start bleeding until 2 a.m., so 13 hours later. So for that entire afternoon and evening, I was just kind of waiting. I did sleep some. I slept a lot in the following week. I didn't get out of bed for a week. I kind of thought they weren't working just because once I passed the 10-hour mark, I was like, what's happening? But I think that the Motrin, the ibuprofen, was taking the edge off of the pain, and so it felt crampy, but it didn't feel excruciating at that point. And I was still awake at 2 a.m. because I had napped during the day and I was kind of expecting something to start happening. I am going to get into details because I want people to know what to expect. If you're watching this and you're going through it, you can click off this video if you don't want to hear about all of this. I had been told that it would be normal to pass lemon-sized clots. I know. So my experience was not what I expected because I didn't pass any clots at all, except for the actual baby in the sack. So at 2 a.m., the bleeding started, and I can't really explain to you the amount of blood that came out in that moment, other than to say I felt it start, and I did have on like the thickest pad known to mankind, but as soon as I felt it start, I went to the bathroom and it just poured out of me. It felt like I was peeing. It felt like my water had broken, but it was blood, and it almost filled the entire toilet, and it was all liquid. There were no clots. It was so much, and it was like all at once. I guess I more expected it to be heavy like that, but more spread out, and it wasn't. It was like all at once. So once it had stopped, I cleaned myself up, I went back to bed, and Over the next hour, the cramps really ramped up. And I had been taking my medication around the clock, so I knew that it wasn't the medication wearing off. It was the cramps were just getting really bad, that the medication wasn't dulling the pain. Or maybe it was, maybe it would have been even worse. I was basically having contractions, which is, I mean, it is what that is. It was very painful. Between 3 and 4 a.m., and I was still awake. I was just reading in my bed because from what I've read online and from what I've seen in other videos, once the bleeding starts, it kind of like continues for like a day or two, like pretty heavy, where you really just can't leave your bed in your bathroom. And between 3 and 4, the contractions were excruciating, and I felt the bleeding start back up, so I went to the bathroom, and that is when I passed the sack with the baby in it. And I actually thought it was a blood clot because it was about the size of a large lemon. I had been told that I was gonna pass huge clots, and I hadn't yet, so I thought that that's what it was. But I did put it in the little container because they said, you know, anything like big, just put in there because you might miss it. You might think it's a clot and it's actually, you know. After that, the cramping and bleeding stopped, like completely, like not even spotting, which was worrisome because I knew it wasn't over, because I know how much bleeding happens after a loss. And I had pretty much just had I had only had to go to the bathroom twice for bleeding, and then the cramping stopped, the bleeding stopped. I ended up falling asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I went to the bathroom expecting there to be a lot more, and there wasn't any. So that entire day, I just laid in bed crying. I mean, I cried for a week and didn't leave my bed. So I kept waiting for it to kind of start back up, and it didn't. And so the next morning, which was Wednesday, because I took the medication Monday at 1, had the bleeding that night, Tuesday laid in bed. Wednesday morning, I called my clinic and I just said, you know, this is really weird, but I took the Cytotex medication and I had some bleeding that night, but it stopped, and the cramping has stopped, and I haven't had any bleeding in 24 hours now. I just feel like I need to come in and be checked because it's either done or it hasn't worked, and I'm gonna have to have a D&C. Like, that's what was going through my mind. It was either like finished, but I knew it wasn't, or it hadn't worked and I was gonna end up with a surgery anyway, which was like my worst nightmare, is to go through both versions, you know, to take the pill and have the bleeding and the pain and still have to go to surgery. Even though I knew that that was a possibility when I chose that route. Logic doesn't make sense when you're in emotional distress. So my clinic was like, yes, please come in right now. Like, again, they've been great. They got me, they were like, get in your car and come over, like, we'll check you. So I went in right away and I took the container, the kit, with that one and only lemon-sized clot, and they did a vaginal ultrasound, and they said, you know, you're definitely not done. There's still a lot of tissue in there, and a lot, like a really thick lining, and this miscarriage is not complete. In fact, they said they weren't even sure I had passed all of the sac yet because there was a really thick part that could have been like a collapsed sac. It was weird. Like, I left that appointment not really knowing anything more than when I had gone in, which was frustrating because I just didn't know if I was gonna end up with a surgery, or I just didn't have any answers. And they told me, this was on a Wednesday, they said, go home, you know, you don't need to do anything right now. It's still possible that it will just come out on its own. We don't need to schedule you for surgery yet. but come back in on Monday and we'll scan you again and, see if anything's happened. And at that point, if I haven't, if nothing else has happened, then I'll have to have the surgery. They also took my blood that day to check my beta HGC number, because that obviously has to go down to 0 before your cycle can be normal again. Are you my pride and joy, my nut bug? He made food, he says, so it's time to go eat lunch. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I had a nice little lunch with the family, and okay. James is literally my pride and joy. He is the biggest blessing I've ever been given. They said come back on Monday for another check, and in the meantime, just take it easy. And let us know if anything crazy happens, if you're in a lot of pain, or if you need us for anything. But they did give me a new kit, and they said, if there's anything more that's like solid that you pass, go ahead and put it in this new kit and bring it to us on Monday. They took what I had brought in and they went ahead and sent it off for testing. Because they didn't know exactly what I had passed and what I hadn't, they just wanted to give me another kit just in case. So I didn't really know what to expect from this point, because the cramping and bleeding had stopped. And I've read online that sometimes your doctor will give you a second dose of the medication. But I asked my doctor and he said no. He said you don't need that. Just go home and get some rest, and your body might still continue with it. So I went home. Like I said, I spent that entire week in bed, crying most of it. I've cried so much in the last week that I don't know if I've cried this much in a week in my entire life. It was Wednesday. Nothing happened Wednesday. Nothing happened, no bleeding, no cramping, nothing. So then on Thursday, around 4 p.m., so like morning, nothing happened, and then around 4 p.m., my cramping started back up. And at this point, I was almost like happy, because I knew that there was still so much that my body needed to do, and I really was not wanting to do a surgery. And so I was happy when the cramping started back up for like a minute, and then it got really, really painful. This time the cramping / contractions lasted from Thursday at 4 p.m. all the way until like Saturday afternoon, so like a full 48 hours, and they were brutal. They were so painful. And I think that they were more painful than the first round, because the first round I had already been taking medication before they started, which, they never got to like their full potential. But because I hadn't been cramping for days, I wasn't still taking the medicine. And so when the cramps started on Thursday at 4, I did take medication when they started, but that medicine like never truly kicked in, because the cramps had just gotten out of control. It was pretty horrific pain for 2 days. You would think your body would give you some sort of a break. You're already going through so much emotional pain, and then to have that much physical pain on top of it, it just, at least when you're in labor, which labor would obviously be even more painful, but at least when you're in labor, like you're laboring to have a baby and to like meet your baby. And this was just like laboring your dead baby. It's so awful. Like it's so awful. It's a level of hell that I never knew. And I don't wish it on anyone. I mean, bleeding started at some point Thursday night, but it wasn't anything like the first time where it was just like so much. This was more manageable. It was more like what I expect someone with a really heavy flow period would be like. but like that heaviest day. And it just continues that heaviness like through the whole time. For me, I have really light periods. I have never experienced anything like this. So it was a lot for me, but I feel like compared to the first round, it wasn't as bad. So it was like, if I had never experienced the first round, I would have thought it was like so much, but because I did, like that sensation of my water breaking, but it was like blood. Because of that, I felt like it was more manageable. The pain was worse. And so that lasted for 2 full days, the pain and the really heavy bleeding, but manageable bleeding. And I kept expecting to pass more like clots, and I just didn't. I mean, it was all liquid. It was really weird because some people will tell you that they passed like 30 lemon-sized clots. Like I literally asked my doctor at my next appointment, like, is there something wrong with me? Why didn't I have clots? Like, why was everything so thin? And could that have contributed to the loss? And he was like, no, that's like, you know, women are different. So anyway, the bleeding and cramping stopped sometime in the middle of the night on Saturday, like between Saturday and Sunday. And then Sunday, everything had just stopped by then. No cramping, no bleeding. And I knew, I mean, I guess you don't know until you check, but I felt pretty strongly that it was over. Like I didn't feel that way after the first round because I just expected it to be so much more. But after the second round, I felt like, okay, I think it's done now. So I went in on Monday for my scan, and it was really sad because that Monday appointment was actually pre-booked. Back when the baby was still alive, that was just like a regular scheduled ultrasound that we had booked to check it. So to go into that appointment knowing that I should be like so excited to see my baby, and it was after that appointment that I was gonna do my, I was basically gonna like be ready to announce. I was gonna find out the gender. I had ordered Sneak Peek and Peekaboo, which are 2 like at-home gender blood tests. I had done Sneak Peek with James. Peekaboo's new. I just wanted to do them both, and I had ordered them both. They had come in. I just hadn't done them before I found out everything, but I was, you know, right at that time where I was like really just getting excited. So I went in and they did yet another scan. I have had so many vaginal ultrasounds in the last like 5-6 months, you guys. And they told me, yeah, like you've passed all the tissue, and your lining is still like kind of thick. I think it was at like a 9.5. I don't really know what that means, but they said like you'll probably spot on and off for the next couple weeks, but like the miscarriage is like pretty much over. They took more blood to check my beta again, and I haven't gotten my second beta number. I have gotten the one that they took on the Wednesday prior, and it was at a 6,500 still, which is like pretty high, considering the baby had already been gone for over a week by that point. But again, my body hadn't started processing it. So that's like, if that beta number had started to drastically drop, then my body would have like started spotting, and like I would have maybe known about the miscarriage, but it was just still really high and holding on to that pregnancy. So until my number is back to 0, my like cycle won't start back up. So they don't really have like a timeline for that. They said it could be anywhere between like 3 and 6 weeks on average, but some women it takes like several months. So they're having me go in every week from here on out until it goes down to 0. So I haven't gotten my second number yet, but depending on what it is, like we'll see kind of how fast it's dropping. I hope that it's starting to drop and it's not still a 6,500. I feel like it's dropping only because my symptoms are starting to go away, which the fact that you can still have strong symptoms after your baby is gone is so sad. That's where I'm at right now. Is I'm still like spotting, but no more cramping. The pain is gone, and I'm waiting to hear about the second beta, and then I go in like every week to kind of like monitor how my number is dropping to see when it goes back to 0. And then we should get the results of the genetic blood work in the next week probably. And once that comes in, my doctor said he was gonna call us in for a meeting and kind of go over like what it means and whether, you know, what the risk factor is moving forward. If it's something that's, you know, once you have it, the chances of you having it again are really high, or if it's something that was just like a fluke and it just happens and it doesn't mean that the next one will also, this will happen. It just kind of depends. And he said that depending on what the result is, he'll recommend either doing IUI again, because that clearly worked for us, or if it's something that makes our risk factor really high moving forward, you know, he'll recommend us moving on to IVF, with the choice still being ours, but just like his professional opinion of where we should go. And we probably honestly will just do what he thinks we should do. It's awful. It is the most painful thing that I've ever gone through, and I'm never gonna be over it, but it doesn't mean that we want to stop trying. And if we are lucky enough to get pregnant again and that baby ends up being born and is healthy, it's not going to replace this baby. This was our baby. I have a lot of struggle mentally with the fact that I'm a big believer in like things happen for a reason, but I can't understand a reason for why this would have happened and for why this baby was only meant to live for 8 weeks. And why a couple who's gone through infertility for 18 months would need to experience this. I'm having a hard time with it, because I don't know why. If everything happens for a reason, why this happened. It just seems really unfair, not just for me and Alex, but for the baby. It's challenging a lot of my beliefs, and it's just been a really, really rough time for me. I feel like today, for the first time since all of this started happening, I feel like the inconsolable grief part is calming and the numbness is starting, which in my mind, it just means that the stages of grief are happening. And like I actually got out of bed this morning and I was like, you know, I think that I'm strong enough to tell this story without just crying inconsolably, like snotting the whole time, which is how it was the last few times I tried to film this video. I'm gonna end it here. I mean, that's all that I have for this story, for this pregnancy journey, and for this baby. I will update you guys when we decide what's next, when we have more information. I am going to continue letting you follow my fertility journey, because I just think it's valuable. I think that I find a lot of comfort in watching other people's journeys that then end in a baby, like a healthy baby. It's giving me a lot of hope right now. And while my journey is at an incredibly painful part right now, I hope that in the future, when times are sunnier and maybe we have a healthy baby, my story as a whole will help someone, or someone will find comfort in it. But regardless, I don't want to pretend this baby never existed. This was our baby, and this is its story. The excitement I had and the hope for this baby shouldn't just be swept under the rug because of how it ended. That's not fair to the life that was that baby. And as sad as the story ended, there was also a lot of joy and hope and excitement and love. And while it's painful for me to watch those updates now, especially the parts where I'm scared and talking about how I feel like something's wrong, I was still so excited and hopeful for this baby. And we're never going to forget it. We're never going to forget this baby. It has a spot in our hearts forever. I don't know how to end this video because there's nothing that I can say that's going to make it, that's going to give closure to this chapter in my life other than just time. There's nothing that I can say that's going to give you comfort if you're going through this. So I'm just going to say thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video, whenever that is.